So oil is Canada's most lucrative commodity. In 2023, crude exports added more than $120 billion to our economy, but almost all of those exports went to the U.S. It's an arrangement that worked fine until this trade war started. So now there are growing conversations about whether we should move forward with new pipeline projects to tap into other markets. As part of our series that looks at how Canada can decouple itself from the U.S. and become more self-sufficient, one of our producers, Michael Hiscock, looks at what it would take to make those scenarios a reality.
Canada is one of the biggest oil producers in the world, but that supply is vulnerable in two main ways. The first way is related to imports. About 73% of our domestic demand is filled by what we pull directly from the ground. But New Brunswick, Ontario, and Quebec import more than other provinces. That's because even though we have more than enough oil to satisfy all of our needs, we have trouble transporting it across such a large country. That's where our second vulnerability comes into play: pipelines. Right now, we have only one that funnels crude from the oil sands in Alberta to eastern Canada. It's known as Enbridge Mainline, and it starts in Edmonton. From there, it flows south to Gretna, Manitoba. That's where it crosses the U.S. border, passing through 4 states before arriving back in Ontario in Sarnia. A second portion of the line splits off, going deeper into the United States, while back in Ontario, the pipeline extends until it terminates in Montreal.
Much of the reason that we've built so much of our pipeline infrastructure into the United States is because it's cheaper and because it's easier typically to actually get cross-border approvals than cross-provincial approvals.
Oil market researcher Rory Johnston has been hoping to see more pipelines built for years.
Our market access outside the United States is extremely limited, but I do think having additional pipeline access, whether it's further pipelines to the West Coast, whether it's Northern Gateway, or further expansions of the Trans Mountain expansion or Trans Mountain system, or something like Energy East, that is not necessarily entirely about maximizing those routes or those sources of egress, but it's about providing optionality so that when we do, say, have a tariff that we're facing, we have better options.
First proposed in 2013, the Energy East pipeline would have connected Canada's largest refinery in St. John, New Brunswick, to a terminal directly in the oil sands. Northern Gateway and Keystone XL would have also provided pathways to bolster our oil exports, but all 3 of these pipelines failed, largely for the same sets of reasons.
Please stay calm. Please stay calm. Reinforcing the BC Supreme Court injunction issued December 31st, 2019.
On February 6, 2020, 6 people were arrested over an impasse involving construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline in BC. It was proposed to run through 190 kilometers of Wet'suwet'en territory. While the pipeline received the approval of 5 of 6 band councils of the nation, its hereditary chiefs opposed the project, and protesters blocked access to a construction site. In all, nearly 100 people were arrested in relation to the project.
Instead of trying to partner with local First Nations and create something that addresses their concerns, we instead think that the way we can go ahead and get a project processed is instead by essentially trying to fast track it. That pipeline in 30, 40 years might start rusting in a way that starts causing issues. We won't remember that. The local community, when they start dealing with that in their drinking water, will. There's a lot of ways to set this up for success by making sure the community is able to feed into these projects. We're going to make sure you have anything from business opportunities, employment, some kind of revenue or financial sharing, and then also environmental provisions. One thing I will highlight is it also does a good job of undoing some of the damage that's been done by more than 100 years of projects going without consent.
So you're saying when done correctly, the building of energy projects could actually further reconciliation efforts?
Absolutely.
That's a big opportunity for Ottawa, which now seems to have renewed interest in building an all-in-Canada pipeline.
Today, I'm announcing a comprehensive new approach to make Canada the world's leading energy superpower.
And we'll use that money to build infrastructure that are needed in Canada. For example, to build a pipeline for natural gas from Alberta to Quebec.
People are talking about a pipeline, but to the best of my knowledge, no company has yet said they would like to build one.
Keith Brooks, Program Director at Environmental Defense, didn't mince words when asked about his stance.
I don't think there's any case for adding a new pipeline. There's not increasing demand for Canadian oil out there. In fact, there's a glut of oil out there right now as the U.S. is trying to ramp up production. OPEC is trying to ramp up production. Meanwhile, there's threats of a recession as a result of the trade war, and so demand is actually going down.
I think while it is important to begin to diversify our market access and optionality for different markets, inevitably we're never going to fully divorce ourselves from the need for the U.S. market. It's too big. The refineries are perfectly geared for this type of crude because those industries really co-evolved together over decades. While Trump has repeatedly and falsely said that they do not need our oil or anyone else's oil because the U.S. has grown so much of its own production, they cannot displace Canadian oil needs in their system. They are going to need our crude for the foreseeable future.
You know, as Rory's it's just talking about, the oil industries in Canada and the U.S. are just so closely linked. Mike, a great piece, by the way. It was really good to get sort of the overview of where we came from and where we potentially may be headed. You did come across some interesting facts about really how interconnected we are. What did you learn?
Yeah, so most of the oil that we produce here in Canada, it's called heavy crude, and it's called that because it's thick, it's sludge-like. If you try to stuff it into a pipeline, it doesn't flow all that well. So part of the reason we import oil from the United States is because it's a lighter crude, and so we take that and we mix it with our oil, and it essentially liquefies it so that it flows through the pipeline better. So what that means is, to some extent, the oil that we import from the United States is used to keep our pipelines working. At the same time, most of that oil that we put in those pipelines goes right back to the United States, where they process it in refineries they've built specifically for our oil. There's at least one refinery in the U.S. that processes nothing but oil from Alberta. And so essentially what that means is we need their oil, but they also need ours, and we're stuck in this boat where we can't really dislodge ourselves from this system that's co-evolved over so many decades.
Sounds very much like the auto industry, doesn't it? Yeah, both hands need to be shaking.
Exactly.
If the industries are that closely linked, Mike, what did your conversations with experts reveal about how much of a difference building a new pipeline would make to help us generate more revenue?
Well, I think one thing that's really been missing from this conversation around building energy infrastructure that's going on right now is the idea of timelines. It's going to take 15 years probably to build one of these things, an oil pipeline. And so by the time that's done, even if Donald Trump can finagle this third term he's been talking about, he will be long gone by the time this pipeline is operational. What's also worth noting is that most projections show that global oil demand is set to peak and therefore begin to decline within the next decade. So while there will certainly still be a lot of money to be made from oil 15 years from now, we might be left feeling, if we move forward with an oil pipeline project, that we invested so heavily in something that by the time it's done, it'll be serving an industry that will likely be in decline.
It is fascinating. Thanks for putting that piece together for us, Mike. We really appreciate it.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.